There are nomads who travel on Earth. And others who wander through space. Where their paths cross, it's an alien world, where things are never quite what they seem, and nothing should be taken for granted. Space. Up here, there's an infinity of that. But inside the space station, working conditions are cramped for the astronauts taking the first steps towards exploring the vast galaxy through which our Earth spins. Months before, they launched from another wilderness, from the 9th largest country in the world, Kazakhstan, draped over the vast, landlocked Aral Sea. More than 3/4 of the country is either desert or semi-desert. Yet even in winter, this unearthly-looking wasteland is far from empty, but full of strange surprises. The last creature you might expect to find in snow and ice, for example, is a camel. Like the dromedary camels that trudge across the world's other endless deserts, Bactrian camels are used for long-distance transport. But they also have another, very unusual job. The ice on the Aral Sea can be 15 centimeters thick. That's 6 inches. After enough fish have been herded in, a trained camel, harnessed to a rough pulley system, is walked in tight, delicate circles on the ice. Thanks to this simple technology, people can survive even when winter is at its most bitter. Kazakhs have used fishing camels in this way for many generations. Today's healthy catch provides more than just food. It brings hope too, for the Aral Sea has had a troubled past and it faces a bleak future. Here at least, fish appear to be returning. The fishing camel's unconventional job is safe, for the time being at least. Kazakhstan is gigantic, bigger than the United Kingdom, France, Spain, Italy, and Germany combined. It's a land of innovation. Wild horses may first have been domesticated here, and in the 13th century, Genghis Khan, ruler of the great Mongol Empire, was one of the legendary leaders to use cavalry to gain power, sending his armies thundering across Central Asia on horseback. Eight centuries on, Kazakh nomads, the Shaban, still break in wild horses as and when they need them. But another, far mightier form of horsepower is also harnessed in Kazakhstan. During the Cold War, the Soviets based their space program here at the Baikonur Cosmodrome, the first launch site in the world. At the time, Kazakhstan was the second largest Soviet Socialist Republic. Remote, vast, and desolate, it was exactly what the Soviet government had been searching for. And so the space age was born, tucked away in a humble, isolated corner of a place little known to the outside world. The Baikonur Cosmodrome was destined for meteoric success. Baikonur was built in one of the most hostile places on Earth. These grasslands or steppes stretch halfway across the world, from China to Europe, a vast, arid corridor linking east to west. It might as well be Mars, except that here, there definitely is life. The desert grasses that cling to the dunes provide straggly shelter for a nightjar. And where there's life, there's always conflict. A warbler chick, too young to fly, is watched carefully by its mother and by something else. Something very hungry. A toad-headed agama lizard. The tail flicking is a conspicuous warning to a nearby rival. Keep away from my catch, or else. But messages from an empty stomach are too strong to ignore. The tail flicks were no empty threat. In the desert, there are winners and losers. Survival seldom allows a draw. In the vast expanses of Kazakhstan, things are never quite what they seem. Animals familiar to their southern neighbors look a little odd. The dromedary camel that roams the deserts of Africa, the Middle East, and India has a single hump. Here in Asia, its cousin has not one hump, but two. Hardy and strong, Bactrian camels are built to cope with some of the harshest conditions on Earth. They can survive for weeks on dry grass alone. The ancient Silk Route traders used camels to trek between China and ancient Rome. Even today, camels are integral to life on the open road. Though many Kazakhs now live in permanent settlements, a few remain semi-nomadic, living in a yurt, a traditional felt mobile home. It's certainly no easy option. As in any desert, every drop of water is precious. Some aspects of this lifestyle have barely changed in centuries. When they need to, camels can gulp up to 100 litres, some 32 gallons of water or more at one time. Kazakhstan gained political independence in 1991. But some of the indigenous people have always clung to a different kind of independence, self-reliance. The Shaban hand down traditional cultural knowledge from one generation to the next, much as the original pastoral nomads have always done. They pass on skills such as how to make the most of their camels. The calf is kept with its mother to encourage milk production, and when the weather gets warmer, the camel's hair can be used to make warm blankets. While the toddler is still too young to be allowed near the camel, his older brother is already learning to ride, just as Shaban children have done for centuries. Those two humps seem to have been designed to maximize passenger comfort. Wild Bactrian camels still roam the Gobi Desert in Mongolia. When food is scarce, Bactrian camels metabolize the fat stored in their humps to produce energy and water. Camels may have been used by humans since as far back as 2500 BC. Another desert in Kazakhstan is a grim reminder of nature's fragility. All that's left for these ships is the spectre of a lost sea. Kazakhstan has suffered much environmental abuse, but the Aral Sea is one of its greatest catastrophes. It used to be 66,000 square kilometers, over 41,000 square miles, bigger than a country such as Lithuania. 40 years ago, the beaches were pristine, the waters sparkled, and a thriving fishing community provided a living for 60,000 people. Then, in 1960, the Soviets diverted the two main rivers, Sidaria and Amudarya, for irrigation. By the late 1980s, the lake had lost more than half the volume of its water. The Aral Sea shrank by half. Salinity and pollution soared, and deltas, reed beds, and marshes once teeming with wildlife evaporated. The fishing industry was wrecked, literally. To reach what was once a bustling fishing town can now involve a trek across as much as 100 kilometers, over 60 miles of wasteland. Not that it's worth the journey. Severed from the Aral Sea, Akaspi has become a ghost town. Most inhabitants were evicted by environmental disaster, and now inexorably the sand dunes are moving in. As elsewhere in Kazakhstan, Akaspi fell victim to disastrous agricultural experiments. If it weren't for the presence of a few camels, there would be no clue that anyone still lives here. But somehow they do. For the children, it's one ever-growing giant sandpit. The Soviets used to pipe water here, but since independence, that precious supply has all but gone. The Aral Sea disaster forced men of working age to seek employment elsewhere. Only a few women, children, and elderly people cling to their homes, to the past. Soon they too will be gone. The desert has won this race for space. Humans may struggle to survive here, but one creature has access to ample natural resources. A dung beetle, flipped upside down into a moving handstand, barrels a ball of camel dung along with its back feet. For as long as there are camels, there will always be dung beetles happy to clear up after them. The dung will provide food and shelter for the beetles' larvae. Dung beetles aren't the only creatures to survive ecological crises. In 1988, the Soviets ordered a gradual increase in water flow to the Aral Sea, although the plans were never carried out. In some parts, life is returning. The Aral Sea has been a traditional stop-off point for a long-distance traveller, the eastern white pelican, back from its wintering grounds in Africa and India. Great cormorants build their communal nests on the flat strips of land that were left exposed by the shrinking sea. Once deep below the surface, this island has been transformed into a towering pyramid of branches, sticks and dried weeds. A castle, complete with a moat. Its towers and ramparts are continually being added to, for it's now spring, nest building time. Somehow, each cormorant can recognize its mate from among the masses, parachuting into land in exactly the right spot. Usually, great cormorants are silent, but when they congregate on their nesting grounds, a chorus of growls, croaks and clucks shatters the peace. The eggs hatch about a month after being laid. Then it gets even more raucous. The common terns that nest on the lower beach prefer a little more personal space. They share the shores with their relatives, Caspian terns. No comfortable cushion of twigs here. This nest is no more than a shallow scrape in the sand. If terns are built for flying, avocets are built for wading. Those long legs are perfect for sloshing through the shallows. They're not, however, designed for easy squatting. For an avocet, it's a long way down to the nest. Humans may have been forced out, but there seem to be enough fish left in the Aral Sea for a small population of birds, though the hard-working cormorant parents still struggle to meet the insatiable demands of their ravenous chicks, who are always clamouring for more. The shrinking Aral Sea left behind other islands, mounds of salt. Beyond these, up on the high plateau, there's a miniature model galaxy, complete with spherical planets and satellites. They were scraped, scoured and sculpted by water. But it wasn't rainwater, and it wasn't ice. The clue to the origin of these strange objects lies deep inside. Ancient marine fossils are embedded in the rock. These boulders were rounded by seawater, for this was once part of a vast ancient sea which was raised during the Tertiary Age. All that's left is a prehistoric carpet littered with fossil fragments millions of years old. The debris strewn around Baikonur is much more recent. A grim reminder that not all of the rocket launches were successful. But hundreds of others were, and Baikonur remains the world's most important launch site in terms of the historic missions that have taken off from it. Though they live in the shadow of groundbreaking progress, some nomads don't let the modern age overtake them. West of the Aral Basin, it's now scorchingly hot and very dry. Not the sort of place you'd expect to find examples of fine architecture. These are the chink-old limestone cliffs that once lined the coast. At their foot lies what appears to be a small village. But in Kazakhstan, where appearances can be deceiving, these are in fact ancient tombs. The rubble is populated only by the souls of the dead. To find life, we must explore higher in the crumbling, dry, buff-coloured cliff face, where some inhabitants bring a welcome splash of colour. European bee-eaters, rainbows on wings. The male leaves his mate in search of the perfect courtship gift. When he returns with a juicy insect in his beak, he immobilizes it by knocking it against the branch. The bee-eater's nest is in a vertical wall of mud. It seems safe, but lurking below, a Tartar sand boa needs to fill its belly. And those without legs are often the most skillful climbers. Even though a sand boa can grow to well over 1 meter or 3 feet, it still blends in superbly with the rock. This one has set its sights not on the bee-eaters, but on their neighbours, sand martins. Every available overhang is crowded. This nest is already empty. While still going in, the sand boa simultaneously comes out. Time for some traversing. The sand boa won't go hungry for long, as the cliff face is pitted with dozens of nest holes. Further down, other much larger holes have also been gouged out of the cliff face. Ancient cave temples carved deep into the rock. As people trekked across the steppes, they spread languages, technology, artistic trends, and religions, but without ever erasing strong local cultures. In Kazakhstan today, faith is a rich blend of imported Islam mixed with traditional ancestor worship and animism, or the belief that every plant, animal, and object has a soul. Inside, it's a labyrinth of arches and steps, corridors and columns, altars and recesses, all hewn straight from bare rock. Pre-Islamic cave temples with Islamic influences, such as a hanging Quran. Deeper in the cool belly of the cliff, the tunnels get narrower. In space, it's even more of a tight squeeze. The history of Baikonur is thick with space firsts, from Sputnik, the first satellite to orbit Earth in 1957, to the first man in space in 1961, and in 1965, the first spacewalk. In 2001, Baikonur celebrated another first. It launched the world's first space tourist. They may be at the forefront of pioneering technology, but astronauts are only human. The temperature inside the space station is carefully controlled and remains constant. On Earth, the temperature on the steppe may range from 45 degrees centigrade, that's 113 Fahrenheit, to minus 45 degrees centigrade, or 49 Fahrenheit. And that explains the existence of one of the most outrageous noses in the world. The extremely rare, strange-looking Saiga carries a thermostat on its face. Inside that inflatable humped nose is a unique network of bones, hairs, and mucus-secreting glands. Shelduck and many other birds simply migrate when it gets too cold. But Saiga can cope with the extreme temperatures thanks in part to that fleshy nose. In summer, it filters out hot dust, and in winter, it heats the air the Saiga breathes so that it doesn't get chilly lungs. The Saiga represents a stage between sheep and antelopes. But for years, it was a misfit, classified first as a goat, then as an antelope, an enigma. Rather like this creature. When is a snake not a snake? When it's a legless lizard. Like other lizards, the legless lizard has ears and eyelids. If threatened, it can drop its tail, a harmless sacrifice which will distract a potential predator. Shelduck escape by launching into space. This one was disturbed by a goitered gazelle male. But the buck, however, has got only one thing on his mind: keeping an eye on the females. During the rut, the male's larynx swells, producing a lump on his neck similar to the goiter that sometimes forms in humans with thyroid disorders. Thanks to this enlarged voice box, the male can produce hoarse bellows, the better to defend his territory and attract mates. Silence is the best policy for an ancient, cold-blooded killer. This is no ordinary lizard. It's a desert monitor, the biggest, most powerful lizard in the whole of Central Asia, and it has a voracious appetite. The ground-nesting prating coal cannot flee. Her chick has wandered too far from the nest. 1.5 meters long, or almost 5 feet, the monitor is a deadly hunter. It has the bone-crushing bite of a crocodile and a tongue like a snake's, highly sensitive to airborne scent molecules. It also has an expandable throat and a flexible jaw, so it can swallow massive chunks of flesh. It's time for drastic action. Astonishingly, the prating coal leaves her hiding place. Then, in full view of the monitor lizard, she puts on the performance of her life. She acts as though her wing is broken. Distracted by her conspicuous struggles, the monitor turns its attention away from the chick. This is no dress rehearsal. The monitor lizard is capable of shocking bursts of speed. As soon as the monitor has been lured away, the chick can scamper to safety. Backstage at last, and another chick saved. Many of the world's prating coals live part of the year here in the Kazakh steppe. The monitor is left thwarted and hungry. Others, too, are struggling to find enough to eat. It's the height of summer, and food is scarce. Mongolian wild asses, or kulan, have split from winter herds that were hundreds strong into smaller groups, the better to exploit the sparse vegetation. They are highly social, intelligent, and extremely endangered. Breeding herds consist of a few mares, several foals, and a single stallion. That's him with the flattened ears, rounding up his harem. Although Kazakhstan's kulan population has declined severely, now, thanks to conservation efforts, numbers are gradually rising. The wild goats have fared much better, safe from human hunters among the steep, jagged mountaintops. The only problem with this penthouse lifestyle is that the water is down at the bottom. Once the chukar partridges have had their fill, the wild goats or ibex can take their turn. With compact feet, small, sturdy bodies, and a low centre of gravity, they are nimble scramblers. Suddenly, a bout of mock combat is interrupted. Something has spooked the partridges. A golden eagle. With vice-like talons and a dagger for a beak, the golden eagle commands instant respect. Small mammals are often on its menu. But all the eagle wanted this time was a drink from that precious water puddle. Its presence caused quite a stir. The ibex regroup and move on together to find a less crowded cliff face. These are nature's mountaineers, found all over Central Asia, usually high up near the snowline. They live life in the vertical, their homes demarcated by geology and rock strata. Another hooved creature also enjoys the high life. As the ibex travel on, increasingly rare wild urial sheep move in to lick the rock minerals and drink from the puddles below. And a griffon vulture spots an opportunity. What it does next might deliver dinner. Like other vultures, the griffons are scavengers, but as well as feeding on dead meat, they also sometimes prey on injured animals. Could this one possibly be trying to engineer a little accident? The Urial sheep flee upwards, tackling near vertical slopes in their desperation to escape. Will one of them lose its footing in the panic and provide a fresh meal for the vulture? Not today. The griffon vulture will have to search further afield for a carcass to strip. Hitching a ride on the thermals with its near 3-meter wingspan, that's just under 10 feet, it soars above the plains in search of a different sort of sheep. Domestic sheep. Sheep were first domesticated in the Middle East and Central Asia and have been herded by the Kazakhs for hundreds of years. Protecting the sheep requires constant vigilance. Lambs in particular are extremely vulnerable. The red fox is an old rival. When it appears, a local expert is called upon to help. The rider has a particular skill, an ancient trick up his sleeve. Or rather, on his sleeve. A golden eagle, and it's as tame as a pussycat. Raised by humans from a young age, just as golden eagles have been for generations, it has bonded with its two-legged owner. And it's utterly used to traditional four-legged transport. It hasn't, however, lost anything of its killer instinct. Man, horse, and bird. It's a relationship as old as the hills. Picturesque it may be, but there's little room for romance in the harsh Kazakh desert. The eagle has a job to do. And in case it needs help, a backup team has been called in. Time for the eagle to do what eagles do best. Once it's all over, the eagle's hood is slipped on again so that it isn't distracted during the ride home. The other members of the emergency team return to their own bases, ever ready to respond to a call-out. So proud are the Kazakhs of this legendary bond with the golden eagle that the bird even appears on their national flag. These days, the Kazakhs have something else to be proud of too. Baikonur. Driven during the Cold War by a combination of the race for space and hostile nuclear standoff, the Baikonur Cosmodrome is these days at the heart of much warmer relations. Today, yet another rocket is being prepared for liftoff. Once a test center for ballistic missiles, Baikonur is now a key player in a unique partnership of nations, an international space program. From conflict and tension to cooperation and collaboration, Baikonur's is an extraordinary history. Set in a land of extraordinary prehistory, a crossroads between the past and the future. Ancient rock carvings depict saiga, kulan, camels, and wild goats. And prehistoric horses. Etchings that depict how nomadic people lived 3,000 years ago, and echo how a few semi-nomadic people still live today. Next to a carving of a horseman, there is a strange, streamlined, airborne object. Perhaps it's a bird. Since its inception, thousands of launches have left from Baikonur. Today, travelers in Kazakhstan have new dreams. From this forgotten corner of the planet, they depart for the stars to join one of the largest non-military international collaborations the world has ever seen, the International Space Station. Inside, astronauts from around the world conduct groundbreaking research in space science. Today, Americans and Russians work together to push the boundaries of cosmic knowledge. They are constantly on the move, spinning through that infinite celestial desert. Nomads of the future. Nomads in space.